TIFU by letting my boss think I was in a cult and accidentally proving him right. It started with an innocent lie. Isn't that always how it starts? So I work for a small marketing firm in Chicago. We're not big enough for a full HR department, so it's a pretty relaxed atmosphere where your boss doubles as your HR, your finance manager, and occasionally the guy who orders lunch. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone's business, and if you call in sick, someone's going to text you a feel-better gif and a meme about how they hope it's not COVID again. That's relevant because a few weeks ago, I needed a random Thursday and Friday off. Not for a vacation. Not for a wedding. Just for something personal that I didn't feel like explaining. That's where the lie started. I told my boss, Jerry, that I had to attend a spiritual retreat with my family. That sounds vague and respectable, right? It's just weird enough to shut down follow-up questions without making it sound like I was going to Vegas to do coke with a llama. Jerry is the kind of guy who thinks he's open-minded because he tried ayahuasca once in Peru, so he just nodded solemnly and said, "Sometimes you gotta reset your inner compass." Cool. Perfect. What I actually did that weekend was help my cousin move to Milwaukee. That's it. No big secret. I just didn't want to get guilt-tripped into working remote those 2 days or be asked why I couldn't move a simple relocation to a weekend. But here's where the universe decided to punish me for being a liar. The following Monday, I came back into the office, fresh from a weekend of lugging a used sectional couch up 3 flights of stairs. Jerry calls me into his office, which is rare, because most of our meetings happen over Slack or while microwaving leftover Thai food. He's got this weird, almost excited look on his face. Like a kid who just found out the tooth fairy is real. He leans in and says, "Hey, man, I've been thinking about what you said. About your retreat." I nod slowly. My brain is trying to catch up. I already forgot I lied about that. He continues, "You don't have to hide it. If you're part of something bigger, some kind of spiritual collective, you can trust me. I've been searching for something like that myself." Cue the alarm bells. I try to steer the conversation back to Q2 marketing goals, but no, Jerry is off the rails. He starts Googling cults in the Chicago area. Out loud. In front of me. Asking if any of these names sound familiar. I try to laugh it off. Nah man, it's not like that. It was just a low-tech weekend, phones off, nature, you know. I'm sweating. But now he's invested. He starts asking me hypothetical questions over the next week. Things like, do you think society could function better if we lived communally? Or what would you do if someone told you the world was ending in 5 years? I answer like a normal person, because, again, I'm not in a cult. But I can see Jerry watching me like I'm Neo and he's Morpheus offering me the red pill. At this point, you'd think it couldn't get weirder. Oh, buckle up. One morning, I come in and find a thick manila folder on my desk. It's unmarked. Inside is a printed, 17-page manifesto titled The Way Back to Oneness. It's riddled with pseudo-philosophical jargon, drawings of eyes inside triangles, and a handwritten note from Jerry that just says, "Thought you might connect with this." Now I'm panicking. I don't know how to confront him without revealing I made the whole thing up. So I ignore it. I throw the manifesto into my bottom drawer and pretend it never happened. Then, 2 days later, Jerry doesn't show up to work. Then he doesn't show up the next day. By Friday, our tiny office is buzzing. Someone says they saw Jerry at a Greyhound station with a giant hiking backpack. Someone else swears he sold his car. That weekend, I get a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It's Jerry. He says he's on a journey now, that he found his tribe and that the veil is lifting. He thanks me, thanks me, for awakening him. He says he'll check in when the winds change. I save the voicemail, half for evidence, half because it still doesn't feel real. The following Monday, the regional VP shows up at our office. Turns out, Jerry didn't formally resign. He just vanished. Disconnected all company accounts. Took his laptop and the petty cash fund. The VP wants answers. Guess who's the last person he talked to? Yeah. So now I'm sitting in a conference room with a lawyer, 2 regional managers, and the VP, trying to explain that I am not in a cult and that I don't know why Jerry thinks I am. I show them the manifesto. I even let them hear the voicemail. It does not help. Eventually, I have to admit I lied about the retreat, which opens an entirely different can of worms about employee honesty and misuse of PTO. I don't get fired, but I get put on some kind of weird performance improvement plan that includes a mandatory weekly check-in where I have to state, for the record, that I'm not recruiting anyone to leave the company. Fast forward to last week. Jerry's been gone for a month. HR, they hired a contractor, finally wipes his accounts and clears his office. I sneak in when no one's looking to see if he left anything behind. On his desk is a notebook. Just one. Open to a page with my name in block letters. Under it, he wrote, "He is the first light. He walks without seeing. And now I sleep with one eye open." If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in German to impress my girlfriend's parents. So this happened a few months ago, but the sheer weight of secondhand embarrassment I experienced still haunts me at random moments in the shower. My girlfriend, Lena, and I have been dating for a little over a year. Things were getting serious, and she finally invited me to meet her parents over the holidays. Lena is German-American. She was born in the US, but both of her parents are from Germany. While she's fluent in both English and German, her parents primarily speak German at home, though they can manage English fairly well. Here's the thing, I took German in high school. For 2 years. And when I say took, I mean I scraped by with a C+ average and barely retained anything aside from Wo ist die Bibliothek and Ich habe einen Bleistift. But for some reason, I got it into my head that dusting off my ancient language skills and pretending to be semi-fluent would not only impress her parents, but show initiative, respect, and charm. No idea why I thought this was a good idea. Lena even told me, "Don't worry, just speak English, they won't mind." But my dumb lizard brain heard that and went, "No, this is how I win them over. Go big or go home." So in the week leading up to the visit, I binge-watched German YouTube channels, ran Duolingo like a man possessed, and practiced phrases into Google Translate like I was preparing for the UN. I rehearsed everything, how to say thank you for having me, dinner is delicious, it's so nice to meet you, and even a few modest jokes I found on a German forum, thinking humor would be a solid bridge builder. The big day arrives. Lena and I fly into Munich, and her parents pick us up from the airport. Her mom greets me warmly with a "Hello, Schönen Dank können Sie lernen," and I respond confidently, "Ja. Ich bin auch glücklich." Which literally means yes. I am also happy. Not terrible, but not exactly an organic response. Lena shoots me a look. The look of a woman beginning to realize that her boyfriend may have overestimated his own intelligence. We get to their home, and her dad offers me a beer. I try to say, "Yes, thank you, I'd love one," but what comes out is, "Ja, danke, ich liebe dich." Which means yes, thank you, I love you. Her dad freezes mid-pour. Lena chokes on her laughter. I realize what I've just said and immediately backpedal, trying to clarify, "Nein, ich mean, ich liebe, es. Das Bier. Ich liebe das Bier." Now I'm just shouting that I love beer. Dinner that night is a parade of disasters. I try to say the food is delicious, das Essen ist lecker, but instead I say, das Essen ist lecken, which is basically the food is to lick. Her mom gives me a tight-lipped smile like she's unsure whether to laugh or be concerned. I attempt to say the chicken is cooked perfectly but end up saying, das Huhn ist sehr tot, meaning the chicken is very dead. As we eat, Lena's parents are being incredibly polite, smiling and nodding, occasionally glancing at each other in a way that definitely said, "Are we sure he's not having a stroke?" I try to salvage the moment by telling a German joke I memorized from Reddit. The joke relied heavily on wordplay that I didn't fully understand, but I went for it. Here's the joke, in German: Was ist orange und läuft durch den Wald? Ein Wanderin. What's orange and walks through the forest? A mandarin that hikes. It's a pun on mandarin and wandern. But what I said was ist orange und läuft durch den Wald? Ein Wandervogel. Which translates to what is orange and walks through the forest? A migratory bird. Not only does it ruin the joke, but also makes it sound like I just made some weird observational statement about wildlife. Silence. I laugh anyway, a forced chuckle like I'm giving myself CPR. Lena is burying her face in her hands. Her dad actually says, interessant, the international phrase for what the hell was that? At this point, Lena switches to English and starts translating the conversation to spare everyone. But I don't give up. I keep throwing out random German phrases I half remembered. I try to compliment the decor and end up saying, Dein Haus ist sehr alt, which means your house is very old. Her mom, bless her soul, says Danke, with the rising intonation of a woman questioning every decision that led her to this moment. The next morning, determined to redeem myself, I offer to help her dad with some work in the garage. He's fixing something with a power drill, and I try to say I can help you, which is Ich kann dir helfen. But what I say instead is Ich kann dich anfassen, which means I can touch you. He stops mid-drill and just stares at me. Anfassen, he repeats. At this point, Lena comes running in, dragging me back into the house like a misbehaving dog. She sits me down and says, okay. No more German. None. At all. The rest of the trip, I stuck to English. Her parents, to their immense credit, pretended nothing happened and even started making little German-English puns to include me, like calling me Bierfreund or jokingly asking if I liebe the salt. It helped break the ice a little, but I knew the damage had been done. Back in the US, Lena's dad sent me a t-shirt with Ich liebe Bier printed in bold letters across the front. I wear it with pride. Shameful, cringing pride. So this happened a few weeks ago, and I'm only now finding the strength to relive it. I, 29M, live in a small, older suburb that borders some woods and an abandoned train station. The area has a reputation for being a bit spooky, but it's honestly pretty quiet. My girlfriend, let's call her Jess, and I moved into an older house about a year ago. It's creaky, drafty, and full of character, which is code for, you will hear every sound and sometimes they will scare the hell out of you. I've always been into Halloween, horror movies, and pranks. Ever since I was a kid, I loved dressing up and scaring the hell out of my friends and neighbors. Harmless stuff, nothing mean. Jess is used to my antics and mostly tolerates them with a mix of eye rolls and occasional laughs. Around mid-March, we had a few friends over for drinks and somehow the conversation turned to local ghost stories. Someone brought up the tale of the Lady of Ashburn Hollow, this urban legend about a woman in white who supposedly haunts the area near the old train station, crying for her lost love who died in some accident back in the 1800s. Cue the light bulb in my dumb, over-caffeinated brain. The next day, I decided I was going to become the Lady of Ashburn Hollow. Not permanently, just for a night or two. For the meme. For the legend. For the chaotic energy. I bought this flowing white vintage dress from a thrift store that was long and tattered enough to be creepy but not so nice that I'd feel bad dragging it through the dirt. I also got this sheer white veil to go over my head and face, which turned out to be much scarier than I expected when backlit. Add some baby powder in my hair, a Bluetooth speaker hidden in a bush playing distant sobbing sounds, and some ghostly humming recorded in my own cursed falsetto, and I had the perfect setup. I waited until midnight that Saturday to make my debut. Jess was out with friends and I hadn't told her about my plan, mistake number 1. I walked down to the wooded area near the old station and stood under a half-dead tree, letting the wind blow my dress while I just waited. Sure enough, some late-night dog walkers came by. They stopped dead in their tracks. I stood still, facing away from them, slowly tilting my head like I was in a slow-motion Exorcist reboot. They bolted. Success. I was high on adrenaline. This was performance art. I stayed out for another hour and managed to freak out 2 more groups of people, one of whom screamed and dropped their phone. The legend was alive. I walked home buzzing with victory. But here's where things started to unravel. Apparently, my ghost gig went viral. Someone had recorded a grainy video of me from far away and posted it on a local Facebook group with the caption, "WTF is this? Just saw this near Ashburn Hollow. Is the legend true?" The comments exploded. Some people laughed. Others were genuinely freaked out. One lady said she hadn't slept all night. A guy claimed he saw the same figure 2 years ago and that it followed him home. Now any rational person would read the room and retire the bit. But not me. I felt like I had accidentally stumbled into a community theater version of The Conjuring, and I was the star. The next weekend, I went out again. This time, I upped the ante. I hid motion-activated lights in the woods to create eerie glows. I timed the crying audio to fade in and out. I even carried an old oil lantern that I found in the attic to add authenticity. It looked incredible. Like, creepypasta level incredible. That night, I noticed someone filming me from a distance. I didn't move or acknowledge them, I thought it would be scarier that way. But about 15 minutes later, I saw flashing blue and red lights bouncing off the trees. At first, I thought it was just someone with a flashlight. But then I heard a very real, very not ghostly voice yelling, "Hands where we can see them." 2 cops came through the brush, guns drawn. I froze, which, ironically, is exactly what a ghost would do. Probably made it worse. They demanded I remove the veil and get on the ground. I complied immediately, babbling about it being a prank and not real and how I had a Bluetooth speaker hidden in the bush, which I pointed to as best I could while prone and trembling. One cop stayed with me while the other went to check the speaker. He came back holding it and muttered, "This guy recorded his own crying?" Yes. Yes, I did. Eventually they realized I was just a harmless idiot with a flair for the dramatic, but they were not amused. They gave me a stern warning for public disturbance and impersonating a figure likely to cause panic, which apparently is a real thing in our area. They told me multiple people had called in, one claiming they heard a woman screaming in the woods and saw a floating figure that vanished. Another said they thought a cult was performing rituals. So I got escorted home in the back of a police cruiser. Jess had just gotten home and saw me pull up in the back seat wearing a wedding dress covered in dirt, mascara tears, and baby powder, looking like a dead prom queen. The officer just said, "Is this your boyfriend?" and she slowly nodded, eyes wide. I tried to explain, but she just sat down on the porch, laughing silently with tears in her eyes. Once the cops left, she asked if I had anything else I wanted to confess, maybe I was Bigfoot too. Needless to say, the lady of Ashburn Hollow has retired. The dress is now in a sealed plastic bag in the attic, like some cursed relic. The legend, however, lives on. Someone painted a mural of the ghost on the side of the coffee shop downtown, and people leave flowers under it. There are now organized ghost walks on Fridays. And while I haven't claimed credit, because I value not being arrested every time I pass that mural, I can't help but whisper, "You're welcome." So yeah, I got a little too into a prank and ended up becoming a local myth. But hey, at least I didn't get tossed. TIFU by accidentally causing my office building to evacuate because of a potato. I work in a mid-sized marketing firm in a downtown high-rise. It's not the most glamorous job in the world, but I like my coworkers, the coffee's decent, and the view from the 19th floor is killer. Our office is open concept, but with a decent kitchen area tucked into one corner. That kitchen is where everything went horribly, horribly wrong. Let me preface this by saying I'm a creature of habit. I bring the same lunch almost every day, a Tupperware with grilled chicken and some veggies, and occasionally, if I'm feeling fancy, I'll bring a baked potato. Why the potato? Because I once read a fitness blog that said potatoes are satiating and underappreciated. Whatever. I like potatoes. Sue me. So last Thursday, I brought my usual meal, plus one large russet potato wrapped in foil. I had already microwaved the chicken in the morning, so all I needed to do was warm the potato. The break room microwave is a tiny, slightly dented Panasonic thing that looks like it survived at least one office renovation and possibly a small electrical fire. I've always been a little suspicious of it, but it's a microwave. You put food in, it gets hot, you take it out. End of story. Except this time, I was on a call when lunch rolled around. I muted myself, popped into the kitchen, and tossed the foil-wrapped potato into the microwave, then punched in 5 minutes without thinking. That's how long I usually do it at home. 2 important things I forgot in my rush. 1. You do not microwave metal. 2. Our office microwave is much stronger than mine at home. Back on my call, I was talking to a client about Q2 projections when I noticed a faint burning smell. At first, I thought someone had just torched their popcorn again. It happens. Then I saw people looking up from their desks, sniffing the air like confused meerkats. A few stood up. I heard someone say, "Is something on fire?" Still trying to keep a straight face on my Zoom call, I excused myself with a quick 1 SEC, and booked it to the break room. When I got there, it was already too late. The microwave was billowing smoke. Not just a little smoke. Thick, black smoke that was curling out from the seams of the door. The entire room smelled like burning insulation, melted plastic, and the unmistakable scent of charred potato. I yanked open the door and was hit with a wall of heat and smoke. Inside was what I can only describe as the remains of a potato-based crime scene. The foil had arced and sparked, the potato had exploded, and the inside of the microwave was scorched to hell. At that exact moment, the fire alarm went off. Now, this wasn't a small office alarm. This was a downtown office tower fire alarm. It blared like a World War II air raid siren, lights flashing in every hallway, and the automated voice calmly telling us all to evacuate. I stood there, potato in hand, like Hamlet cradling a flaming skull, as my coworkers began pouring out of the office with coats and laptops. Some were laughing. Some looked annoyed. Our office manager, a woman named Rhonda who takes literally no bullshit, stormed up to me and demanded, "What the hell did you do?" I mumbled something about a potato and microwave and accident, and she just stared at me like she was deciding whether I deserved to be fired on the spot or publicly flogged. Meanwhile, the entire building was being cleared. All 32 floors. Hundreds of people filing down stairwells because of my lunch. Fire trucks arrived minutes later. 4 of them. Firefighters in full gear came stomping through the lobby and up the stairwell. They found me waiting in the hallway like a guilty dog. The lead firefighter was a large man with a beard like a lumberjack and eyes that said, "I've seen some things, and none of them were this stupid." He went into the break room, came out holding the dead microwave with one hand and the blackened foil potato in the other, looked at me, and said, "You microwaved aluminum foil?" I nodded. He just sighed, handed the remains to Rhonda, and walked off muttering, "Every damn week, we weren't allowed back into the building for over an hour." Everyone had to stand outside in the chilly April wind while the fire department cleared the floors and aired out the building. By the time we got back upstairs, the microwave had been removed, the break room smelled like a burned-down Wendy's, and I had become office famous. One of my coworkers taped a photo of a potato to my monitor with a label that read, "Wanted for arson." The next day, someone anonymously left a new microwave in the break room with a sticky note, *no foil, Potato King, asterisk I haven't heard the end of it since. It's been days, and I'm still getting emails with subject lines like hot potato and spudtacular mistake. Someone even changed my Slack name to Sir Bakes-a-lot. The worst part? HR had to file a formal incident report. I had to sit in a meeting and explain, like a child, that I didn't mean to almost burn down the building with a starch-based lunch item. The HR rep, bless her, tried to keep a straight face, but I could see her shoulders shaking as she typed it all out. I haven't dared to bring another potato to work since. I've switched to rice. Safe, boring, non-flammable rice. But I know, deep down, that every time someone smells something slightly burnt, every time an alarm beeps or a microwave hums a little too loudly, they're going to think of me. The guy who evacuated 900 people because he forgot you can't put foil in a microwave. So this happened last month and I'm only just now able to laugh about it. For some context, I, 31M, have been single for a while, but recently got back into dating. I matched with this woman, Emily, 28F, who is stunning, well-traveled, and way out of my league. I swear she looks like someone who vacations in Santorini and actually belongs there, not like me who once ate airport sparrow on the floor of a delayed terminal and called that international cuisine. Anyway, our first few conversations went really well. She mentioned she was really into wine, which I stupidly pretended to also be into. Truth is, I can tell the difference between red and white, but beyond that, wine to me is either hurts my wallet or hurts my liver. But I didn't want to seem uncultured. So I said something like, oh yeah, I'm a bit of an amateur sommelier myself. Because apparently, when faced with a beautiful woman, my brain thinks the best move is to lie with confidence. She seemed excited and suggested we go to this really charming little French place for our first date. I said yes, even though I normally avoid places with words like prefix because I never know what the hell they mean and I'm scared of being judged for Googling the menu at the table. So date night comes. I show up in my best blazer, trying to look like the kind of guy who knows how to pronounce Chateauneuf-du-Pape without sounding like I'm choking. Emily is already seated and looks incredible. She's glowing. I'm sweating. The waiter comes over, greets her in French, because of course, and hands us the wine menu. And I do mean wine menu, this was not a list. This was a book leather-bound, like the Necronomicon but for fermented grapes. Pages and pages, divided by region, year, grape, vintage, solar alignment, probably. My blood pressure spiked instantly. Emily smiles and goes, you pick. I trust your taste. Which is a thing women say in rom-coms right before the guy makes a catastrophic mistake and learns a life lesson. I panic. I flip through the book pretending to look thoughtful, hoping one of the names jumps out at me. I pick something I think sounds impressive, a 1997 Chateau Lagrange from St. Julien. It was the second most expensive bottle on the list, and I figured, if it's pricey, it has to be good, right? The waiter raises an eyebrow slightly when I point to it, but says excellent choice and glides away. Emily looks impressed. Wow, bold pick. You like your left bank blends, huh? I don't know what that means. I nod and mutter something about structure and depth, hoping that covers all my bases. Wine arrives. The waiter does the whole ritual. He pours a little into my glass for tasting. I sniff it like I've seen people do in movies, swirl it around like I'm about to summon a genie, take a sip, and go very earthy. Emily looks at me with a bit of surprise and goes, wow. That's one word for it. I realize instantly I've said something wrong, but before I can ask, she takes a sip and visibly winces. She tries to play it cool but says, that's a bold profile. The waiter is watching. I can feel something weird in the air. I take another sip and now that I'm not distracted, I taste vinegar? Is that right? It's got a real funk to it. Not a good funk. Like gym socks that did a semester abroad. I don't want to admit I've made a mistake, so I say something like, it's got a mature palate, really aged. The waiter smirks and says, indeed. This bottle is known for its volatile acidity. It's rare to find one in such unaltered condition. Then he bows and disappears like a Bond villain. Emily is now quietly Googling the bottle under the table. Her expression shifts from confusion to horror. She looks up and says, "This wine was part of a collection famously spoiled in improper storage. It was written about in Wine Enthusiast. It's like a cautionary tale." At this point, I'm fully sweating through my shirt. I try to play it off, say something like, I thought it might be controversial. I'm drawn to complex flavors. She deadpan stares at me and says, "This is less complex and more fermented compost." But it gets worse. Apparently, that specific bottle, because this restaurant is weirdly fancy and likes conversation pieces, was part of a batch that had been auctioned after being confiscated from a diplomat's private collection. The wine wasn't just spoiled, it was symbolically infamous in certain circles. Like, accidentally ordering the French equivalent of a meme-level disaster infamous. A table near us overhears, and suddenly this older gentleman with a thick accent says something loudly in French. The waiter rushes over. More French. People are glancing. I have no idea what's happening, but I realize I've done something very wrong. Emily looks at me and goes, "We should probably go." The restaurant manager comes over and, in a very polite but very stern voice, asks us to vacate the table. Apparently, the wine was meant to be kept on the menu for display only, not ordered. They didn't think anyone would actually choose it. It was like ordering a bottle of new Coke for $500. Except international. I try to protest, but Emily just grabs her coat and says, "I think we've aged enough tonight." We leave. I'm mortified. She's laughing by the time we get to the street, and she admits she kind of admired my commitment to the bit, even if I was full of it. We end up getting street tacos and beers and having a surprisingly great time, mostly with her roasting me. Amazingly, there was a second date. I didn't pretend to be an expert in anything this time. We stuck to beer. And I still can't look at wine menus without hearing the ghost of that waiter whispering, "Volatile acidity." So here's the deal. My best friend Jason is the kind of guy who always does things extra. He's not flashy, he's just got this insane commitment to themes. We're talking about the dude who once hosted a Game of Thrones potluck that ended in a staged mock battle with foam swords and hired actors. So when he got engaged to Melissa, a fellow nature and wildlife enthusiast, the wedding theme was, of course, medieval forest elegance. Think velvet gowns, wooden goblets, flower crowns, and yes, live birds of prey. Now, this might seem over the top to most people, but to Jason and Melissa, it was art. So when I volunteered to handle the bird situation as part of my best man duties, I was honestly hyped. I have zero background in falconry, but I figured it was just a couple of phone calls and maybe holding out some meat on a glove. Easy, right? No. Not easy. Not even close. I started by Googling falconry services in our area. I found two companies, Noble Wings and Sky Kings. Their websites were suspiciously similar. Both offered trained birds, period-accurate attire, educational performances, and interactive flight demonstrations. Sky Kings had slightly better reviews, but Noble Wings had more dramatic photos. So, in true idiot fashion, I called both, thinking maybe one would cancel or I could pick the better one closer to the date. Spoiler, I did not cancel either one. The wedding was held at this absolutely stunning forest clearing that Jason and Melissa had rented from a private land trust. It was all set up with wooden benches, lanterns in the trees, and a flower-adorned altar. Everything was going perfectly. Guests were arriving in their flowing dresses and cloaks. There was medieval lute music playing softly in the background, and I was standing there in a suede tunic, feeling like a boss. About 30 minutes before the ceremony, I hear rustling and then see a guy in a leather jerkin walking up the path with a massive golden eagle on his arm. Behind him were two more handlers with hawks. Sky Kings, I thought, impressed. I greeted them, offered them some water, and told them the ceremony would start soon. They nodded and went off to set up near the tree line. 15 minutes later, another guy in a leather jerkin arrives, with a falcon. And 2 more handlers. Also with birds. One of them is carrying a full owl. "Noble wings," he announces proudly, shaking my hand like he's about to knight me. I stared at him, completely frozen, brain processing absolutely nothing except oh no. Oh no. Turns out, both companies thought they had exclusive rights to this event. Which, fair. That's how these gigs usually go. I tried to explain that it was my mistake and we only needed one team, but they were already sizing each other up like rival street gangs. There's something you should know about falconers, they take this stuff seriously. Like, we raise these birds as our children serious. One of the Sky King's guys looked at the Noble Wings owl and muttered, "Barn owls are barely even raptors," and it was on. At first it was all passive-aggressive. Glares. Tense whispers. Snide comments about talon length and Jess craftsmanship. I was desperately trying to calm things down, reminding them that this was a wedding, not the red wedding. But then the ceremony started, and things got worse. The plan was for one of the Sky King's hawks to fly the rings in during the vows. Melissa loved this idea. I had cleared it with the officiant and rehearsed it with the handler. What I didn't realize was that Noble Wings had also planned a dramatic mid-ceremony aerial surprise with their falcon. So, picture this, Jason and Melissa are standing at the altar, smiling lovingly at each other. The guests are tearing up. The hawk from Sky Kings is released and swoops gracefully down the aisle, talons clutching a small velvet pouch. The crowd gasps in awe. Then, mid-flight, the Noble Wings falcon is also released. Now we have 2 birds in the air. 2 highly territorial, apex predator birds. They immediately start attacking each other mid-air. Screeching, clawing, full National Geographic chaos. Feathers rain down on the guests like confetti. One lady screams and dives under a bench. The harpist ducks behind her instrument. Jason's grandma covers her Yorkie with her cloak. Meanwhile, the falconers are shouting at each other across the field. "Call him off. You shouldn't even be here. You're stressing out Artemis. Your jesses are improperly secured, Greg." In the confusion, the owl, yes, the goddamn owl, takes off too. And instead of flying majestically, it immediately flutters straight into the cake tent and crashes into a 3-tier elderflower wedding cake that took 2 days to construct. It flaps wildly, knocking over glasses, sending frosting everywhere before getting tangled in a decorative ivy garland. Melissa is crying. Jason looks like he's about to kill me. The officiant is frozen mid-vow like someone hit pause on him. I try to intervene. I run toward the falconers, hands in the air like I'm defusing a hostage situation. I yell something like, "Let's just all lower the birds and then get clipped in the head by a rogue hawkwing." I go down like a sack of medieval potatoes. When I come to, I wasn't out long, just dramatic. The birds have finally been wrangled back to their handlers, but the damage is done. The altar is wrecked, the cake is obliterated, half the guests are traumatized, and someone is calling the local animal control because there are multiple illegal bird fights happening in the woods. After some frantic apologies, refunds, and one very awkward group photo with the surviving cake tier, the wedding proceeds. No birds this time. Just vows, rings, hand-delivered, and a couple who are very, very tired. Jason forgave me eventually. He even joked that I gave them the most unforgettable wedding ever. Melissa is still wary around me. Understandable. We still hang out, but I now avoid all responsibilities involving animals, airborne or otherwise. And both falconry companies? They apparently now use our wedding as an example of what happens when amateurs interfere. One of them even made a passive-aggressive TikTok about it that got 2 million views. To this day, I wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, hearing the screech of hawks and the faint whisper of "Your jesses are improperly secured, Greg." TIFU by telling my boss my honest opinion during a company retreat, and then getting trapped with him for 48 hours, so this happened a few months ago, but the psychological damage is fresh enough that I'm just now processing it fully. My company does this thing every year called Alignment Week, which is corporate speak for a mandatory retreat in a remote cabin where you pretend to be best friends with the same people who steal your yogurt from the fridge. It's a tech startup, and we have one of those overly ambitious, startup guru-style CEOs who reads too many leadership books and quotes Elon Musk like he's a prophet. Let's call him Brett. Because his name is Brett. Now, I had just hit my 1-year mark with the company. I wasn't the loudest or the quietest employee. I was that guy who did solid work, didn't rock the boat, but also occasionally took 11:58 a.m. lunches to avoid people asking me to eat together. In other words, average employee vibes. So, we get to the cabin. It's deep in the Colorado Rockies. No cell service, no internet, just team building and optional journaling sessions that aren't optional at all. The second night, Brett hosts a truth fire. It's exactly what it sounds like. Everyone gathers around a literal fire pit and shares one radically honest opinion about the company. Brett kicks it off by saying he thinks our company is too focused on pleasing investors and not enough on changing the world. Inspirational music literally played in the background. I wish I was joking. People started going around. Most people said safe things like, "We could have fewer meetings," or, "I think our Slack culture could be more inclusive." Harmless, HR-approved stuff. Then it got to me. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the whiskey Brett insisted everyone drink, or maybe it was the fact that I hadn't pooped in 2 days because I'm not a woods bathroom kind of guy. But I just snapped. I said something to the effect of, "I think a lot of our work is performative. We act like we're disrupting industries when really we're just reinventing spreadsheets with better fonts. And honestly, I think the obsession with hustle culture is toxic. People here don't look happy. They look exhausted and scared." Silence. Literal silence. Someone dropped their marshmallow in the fire. I think I saw Brett's eye twitch. Then he said, "Thank you for your vulnerability," which we all know as CEO speak for, "You're on a list now." The group moved on, and I spent the rest of the night trying to casually disassociate while maintaining eye contact with no one. But here's where it goes from awkward to apocalyptic. The next morning, we were supposed to split into pairs for a 24-hour survival challenge. It was Brett's idea. Push yourself outside the limits of comfort to discover who you really are. That kind of nonsense. Guess who I get paired with? Brett. Of course. I immediately assumed this was a coincidence. Or maybe karma. But I soon realized it was 100% intentional when Brett handed me a backpack, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "Let's see if your ideas can survive out there." I didn't even know how to respond to that. So I laughed. Mistake number 1. We were dropped off miles from the cabin with only a map, a tarp, a bag of trail mix, and a two-way radio that only worked at certain elevations. The plan was to hike 5 miles to a point, set up camp, and return the next morning. Easy, right? Wrong. Within an hour, Brett decided we didn't need the map because we should trust our instincts. Mistake number 2. I tried to subtly insist that the map was useful, but Brett was in full alpha wilderness mode. He said things like, "Maps are crutches and nature is the original startup." So we followed his instincts. Straight into a goddamn bear den. Okay, the bear wasn't home, but we found some very fresh tracks and a pile of steaming evidence that it had been there recently. I begged to turn back, but Brett wanted to observe the terrain for educational value. I almost cried. Eventually, we made it to a clearing where Brett decided to build a fire using a magnesium stick and 0 actual fire building skills. It took 2 hours, during which I watched the sun vanish and our body temperature drop. I finally used the lighter I had secretly brought, and he looked at me like I'd spit on his crypto wallet. That night, as we lay shivering under a half-collapsed tarp, he finally brought up what I said around the fire. You really think this place is toxic? I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to go viral for dying in the woods after offending a CEO. So I tried to soften it. I think we could all use more balance. He turned toward me in the dark. Do you have balance, man? You seem like someone who's always on edge. I nearly snapped again, but I caught myself. Maybe I'm on edge because I'm lying in 30-degree weather with the guy who signs my paychecks and might be planning to feed me to a bear. He laughed. Like, really laughed. For the first time in 24 hours, Brett seemed normal. Human. We ended up talking for hours that night. About stress. About how he feels trapped trying to keep the company afloat. About the pressure to keep the illusion going. He even admitted that some of my criticism was painfully accurate. Then he asked me what I would do differently. And folks, I blacked out. Not literally, but close. I went on a TED Talk-style rant about flexible work hours, valuing deep work over constant visibility, and having a culture that encourages honest feedback without punishment. He just nodded, occasionally grunting like a monk absorbing ancient truths. We got back the next day. Everyone looked shocked that we hadn't killed each other. For the next few weeks, I kept my head down. I expected to be quietly let go. But then something weird happened. Brett started quoting me in meetings. Literally using phrases I said that night. People started calling me the Oracle as a joke. Then it got weirder. Brett asked me to co-lead a culture reset initiative. I went from background employee to unofficial spiritual advisor. I got a raise. I got respect. I also got about 100 nervous stares every time I walked into a room. To this day, people still ask me what I did to Brett out there. I just say we saw a bear and made peace with our own mortality. Which is technically true. But the real truth is this: I told my CEO he was full of shit, and he liked it. TIFU by pretending to be my girlfriend's dad on the phone and accidentally ruining her sister's wedding. It all started with a harmless joke. At least, that's how I sold it to myself. My girlfriend Emma and I have been together for 3 years. I love her more than I ever thought possible, and I've grown pretty close with her family. Her dad, Dave, is a rugged, old-school contractor with a dry wit and a deep, gravelly voice that sounds like he eats gravel for breakfast and washes it down with diesel. He's the kind of guy who doesn't talk much unless he's being sarcastic, but you know he cares under all the gruffness. Over the years, I've developed a surprisingly good imitation of his voice. It started as something I did to make Emma laugh, but it evolved into a full-blown party trick. Her family got a kick out of it, especially her brother Matt. Even Dave himself chuckled once when I mimicked him saying, "What the hell is kale?" Fast forward to last weekend, Emma's younger sister, Sophie, was getting married. It was a big deal. The whole family had been planning for months. The venue was a fancy vineyard estate, the guest list was overflowing, and Sophie was a ball of wedding-stressed nerves. 2 days before the wedding, we were all staying at an Airbnb near the venue. I was out back with Matt and a few cousins, having a couple beers, when the idea hit me. Emma's phone buzzed on the table. She was inside helping Sophie with last-minute prep. I peeked and saw it was a call from the wedding planner. I wasn't going to touch it, but then I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious if Dave answered? I picked it up and said, in my best Dave voice, "Yeah?" The wedding planner paused and asked, Mr. Carson? Who else would it be? I growled. She launched into a rapid-fire explanation about a change in the floral arrangement. Apparently, the specific roses Sophie wanted weren't available, and they'd have to go with a similar substitute. I just grunted and said, "She'll live. Just do what you gotta do." Then she said something about the string quartet. There'd been a miscommunication about the timing. They were set to arrive at 6:30 p.m. instead of 5 o'clock. I, in my infinite idiocy, shrugged and said, "That's fine. She doesn't need that much music. Hell, play a Spotify playlist." Then she mentioned the catering. The groom's side added 8 vegan meals last minute, she said. And what did I say? What did fake Dave say? I muttered, just give em extra salad. Don't overcomplicate it. The planner hesitated. Are you sure? Positive, I said, and hung up. It was meant to be a 5-minute joke. I even told Matt what I'd done and he laughed so hard he nearly choked on his beer. I figured the planner would confirm with Sophie or Emma, right? Wrong. Cut to the wedding day. Everything is beautiful, at first. Sophie is glowing, the guests are happy, and I'm standing there proud, thinking I've gotten away with my dumb little prank. Then, the cracks begin. First, Sophie walks into the reception hall after the ceremony and sees that her floral arrangements are completely different. She's trying to keep it together, but I can see the twitch in her eye. I overhear her saying to Emma, "Why would they change the flowers?" Emma says, "I don't know, let me find out," and she vanishes to track down the planner. Then, the music stops. The string quartet plays one single piece and begins packing up. Sophie corners the planner and asks what's going on. The planner, confused, says, "Your father told me to shorten the set and go with a playlist after one song." I'm standing there holding a glass of wine, frozen. Sophie says, "What?" The planner, realizing something is off, starts explaining all the changes that Dave approved. The roses, the music, the vegan meals, he said to give them extra salad. At that exact moment, Sophie's new mother-in-law, who is vegan and also terrifying, comes over with an untouched plate of leaves and 2 cherry tomatoes. What kind of Mickey Mouse catering is this? And Sophie loses it. She demands to see her father. Dave, who is absolutely clueless, comes over with a whiskey in hand, blinking like a man who's just wandered into a war zone. The planner starts explaining everything he told her on the phone. Dave says, "I didn't talk to you." Silence. I should have come clean. Right then. But instead, I did what any coward would do, I disappeared. I slipped out the side door and hid behind the building, staring at a dumpster for 20 minutes like it held the answers to life. Eventually, Emma found me. Her face was unreadable. I tried to make a joke. "Well, at least the wine is good?" She didn't laugh. "What did you do?" she asked, slowly, calmly. Like a cop interrogating a suspect who's definitely guilty. I told her everything. The joke. The voice. The planner. The salad. She stared at me for a full 30 seconds. Then she just walked away. The fallout was biblical. Sophie cried through most of the reception. The planner was furious. The in-laws thought the Carsons were sabotaging the wedding. Dave was so mad he wouldn't look at me. Emma didn't talk to me for 2 days. 2 agonizing days. We eventually had a long, painful conversation. She said she still loved me, but I needed to grow the hell up. She was right. What I thought was a harmless joke had real-world consequences that hurt people. I apologized to Sophie, Dave, the planner, even the vegan mother-in-law. Most of them have forgiven me, or at least moved on. Sophie says it'll be a funny story someday, which I doubt, but appreciate. Emma and I are still together. Barely. I've got a long way to go to earn back full trust, but I'm doing the work. And I haven't impersonated Dave since. Hey, friends. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by crashing a funeral I wasn't invited to and accidentally impersonating the deceased's estranged son. It all started when I agreed to go on a second date with this woman I met through a mutual friend. Let's call her Sophie. Our first date was coffee and a walk, very chill, and she seemed nice enough, kind of artsy, a little intense, but interesting. For the second date, she suggested something a little unconventional. I was intrigued. I said yes. So the day arrives. I meet her outside a small Catholic church about 45 minutes from my apartment. It's early afternoon, rainy, and she's wearing all black. I ask if everything's okay and she just says, "You'll see." It's beautiful in a weird way. Then she drops the bomb, "We're going to a funeral." I thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. She explains that it's for someone she used to know when she was younger, some family friend who passed away. She didn't really know him well, but she feels like funerals are these raw, emotional places where people are really themselves, and she wants to experience that with someone. A shared moment of vulnerability. I don't know what to say, but she's already walking inside, so I follow like an idiot because I have zero backbone and, okay, I also thought maybe this was just some weird artsy thing she does. We walk into the church, and instantly I feel like I've stepped into a scene I have no business being in. Quiet sobs. Closed casket. An older woman in the front row clutching a handkerchief like it's the only thing keeping her from collapsing. People are all staring at us. And I mean staring. Sophie whispers, "Just sit near the back and be respectful." So we sit. The service starts. Some guy gets up to do a eulogy, starts talking about this man, Richard, as a complicated but loving father, a Vietnam vet, a high school science teacher. I'm trying to blend in, look sad, nod when appropriate, but I keep catching glances from people. A few look at me, then whisper to each other. One lady keeps dabbing her eyes and looking at me like she recognizes me. Halfway through, someone from the front row turns around and makes direct eye contact. It's the old woman with the handkerchief. She whispers something to the guy beside her, who also turns and looks at me. Now I'm fully sweating. At the end of the service, everyone lines up to give condolences to the family. Sophie says we should too. I try to protest, but she pulls me in line. "It's just polite," she whispers. We get up to the widow, and she grabs my hand, pulls me into a hug, and starts sobbing into my chest. She's not tall. Her face is pressed against my shoulder and I hear her say, muffled, "I didn't think you'd come." I freeze. Behind her, that guy who turned earlier is watching me with this cautious, guarded look, like he doesn't trust what he's seeing. And then she pulls back, looks at me with trembling lips and says, "I know things ended badly with your dad. But thank you. Thank you for being here." I look at Sophie, who is wide-eyed and absolutely loving this moment. She thinks it's some emotionally transcendent thing. And then I realize what's happened. They think I'm Richard's estranged son. I stammer out a "yeah, he was complicated," which is apparently the exact right thing to say because she starts crying again, harder this time. The guy next to her finally introduces himself as Uncle Jeff and gives me a firm, almost challenging handshake. Like he's testing to see if I'll flinch. I don't. I nod. He nods back. Sophie whispers, "This is so intense, like it's performance art." I'm in hell. Then another woman comes up, a cousin or something, and hugs me. Says, "He talked about you, you know. Especially near the end. He regretted so much." I nod again, trying not to pass out. Sophie and I finally make it out, and she's practically glowing. She says it was the most powerful emotional moment she's had in years. I don't say anything until we're in the car, and even then I'm just like, "We need to talk." She's unfazed. Says it's fine, they didn't know Richard's son, and if anything I probably brought them closure. I tell her I feel sick. She says I'm being bourgeois about human connection. I don't even know what that means. I go home and spend the evening spiraling. I look up Richard's obituary. There's a picture. It's uncanny. This man was maybe 30 years older than me, but we had the same strong jaw, same crooked smile, same messy brown hair. It's freaky. I look like what his son probably would look like. And then I make a bigger mistake. I go on Facebook. I search the name I saw mentioned in the obituary, Matthew Green, Richard's real son. And I find him. Different city. Profile picture is a dog. No recent posts. But he exists. Curiosity eats at me. I message him. Just say, hey, I think we may have crossed wires today. Can I ask you something about your dad? He doesn't respond. I feel like garbage. I swear to never talk to Sophie again. Fast forward 3 days. I'm at work. I get a message. From Matthew. It says, you were at the funeral. My heart drops. He writes, my cousin sent me a photo. Said I finally showed up. Why did you go? I write back something long, something apologetic. I tell the whole story. About Sophie. About the misunderstanding. About how I got swept up and didn't want to break this poor widow's heart. It takes him a day to reply. Then he says, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But, thanks. I didn't go. I couldn't. Sounds like she needed someone. Even if it wasn't me. I still feel awful. But a little less awful than before. I never heard from Sophie again. She texted me once saying I was emotionally shallow and that I missed a real moment. I blocked her. I've had some bad dates before, but this one takes the absolute crown. Nothing like being mistaken for a grieving son to really ruin your week. TIFU by accidentally sending a love letter to my boss instead of my girlfriend, so this happened yesterday, and I'm still not entirely sure how to process it. I've been on the verge of a mental breakdown ever since it happened, and I'm hoping writing this out will somehow help me understand what went wrong. I'm also hoping it might make you laugh, because this has to be one of the most mortifying things I've ever done. It all started earlier this week when my girlfriend, Emily, and I were having a bit of a rough patch. We've been together for almost a year now, but recently things had been a little tense. Between both of us being busy with work, long-distance weekends, and just general life stress, we hadn't had much quality time together. I know, communication is key, but when you're both juggling careers and trying to keep your personal life intact, it's easy to lose sight of what's important. Anyway, Emily and I had been texting back and forth about it, and I was trying to express how much I cared about her and how much I wanted to fix things. I decided to take a more old-school approach and write her a heartfelt letter. I've always been a bit of a romantic at heart, so I spent a good chunk of the afternoon writing something that, in my mind, would melt her heart. The letter was long, probably a bit too long. But I was pouring my soul into it. It was full of sweet sentiments and some inside jokes we shared. I wrote about how much I appreciated her, how much she meant to me, and how I was looking forward to our future together. Basically, I was trying to make up for a few weeks of distance and maybe even score some major boyfriend points. So, I finished the letter, proofread it a few times, because, hey, if you're going to put your emotions out there, you want to make sure it's perfect, and felt pretty proud of myself. I was feeling like the world's most considerate boyfriend. The plan was to send it to Emily in the evening, but I had to finish up some work first. At this point, I had a pretty busy day at work. I work for a fairly large company, and I had a ton of emails to go through. I also had to prepare a few reports for my boss, John. Now, John is a good guy. He's a bit of a workaholic, but he's decent and always professional. I've been working at this company for a couple of years, and he's been my boss for the last 6 months. We've got a pretty good rapport, but he's not exactly someone I'd call a friend. At around 3 p.m., I received an urgent email from John asking for a quick update on a project we were working on. The email was brief but to the point, as always. I quickly typed up a response, attaching the report he'd asked for. Then, I took a moment to check my phone for any messages from Emily, because I was really excited to send her the letter. I quickly scrolled through my texts, thinking, I'll just send the letter now, get that out of the way, and then focus on work. So, I go into my drafts folder and pull up the letter. I tap on the send button, but for some reason, my phone gets a little glitchy for a second. The letter doesn't immediately go through, and instead, I get distracted by another email notification that just popped up from my work inbox. I read the email from John, responded quickly, and then moved on to the next task at hand. What happened next was a blur, but somehow, when I glanced back at my phone about an hour later, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. I saw a notification saying that my letter had been sent. Except, it wasn't sent to Emily. It had been sent to John. My boss. The guy who I've only ever exchanged work-related emails with. The guy who has no idea I even have a girlfriend. Now, before I continue, I want you to understand the gravity of the situation. This letter was not your average casual text. It was an emotionally charged love letter. There were intimate details in it. I'd mentioned how I missed Emily's touch, how her laughter was the highlight of my day, and how I was looking forward to holding her close when we finally saw each other next. I'm cringing just thinking about it now. The thought of John reading this, well, it's too much to bear. Panic set in immediately. I frantically checked my phone and tried to recall the message, but of course, it was already too late. It had been sent. To my boss. My heart started racing, and I had no idea what to do. Do I apologize? Do I pretend it was a mistake? Do I just ghost him forever? I quickly composed myself, took a deep breath, and decided to send a follow-up email. I wasn't sure how to phrase it, so I went with something that I hoped would sound professional and nonchalant, but still acknowledge the error. Hi John, I hope this email finds you well. I just wanted to quickly apologize for the message you received earlier today. I believe I accidentally sent you a personal email that was meant for my girlfriend. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and I assure you this won't happen again. Thanks for your understanding. My name. I clicked send, but as I did, the realization hit me, there was no way to recover from this. My boss had just read a long-winded, overly emotional love letter that was meant for my girlfriend. The letter was sincere, sure, but it wasn't exactly professional. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I didn't hear from John for the rest of the day, which made me even more nervous. Did he think I was crazy? Was he laughing about it with other coworkers? I didn't know, but the anxiety was killing me. The next morning, I showed up to work early, hoping to avoid any awkward encounters. As soon as I walked in, John was at his desk. He didn't look up when I entered, but I noticed he had a bit of a smirk on his face. My heart sank. I could tell something was coming, and I wasn't ready for it. A few minutes later, he called me into his office. My stomach twisted as I walked in, bracing for whatever uncomfortable conversation he was about to initiate. He gestured for me to sit down, and I did, trying to act calm despite the sheer embarrassment I was feeling. John leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I got your email yesterday. It was sweet. He paused for a moment before continuing. But, I think you meant to send that to someone else? I felt my face turn red as I stammered, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what happened, I just mixed up the emails, I guess. John chuckled, clearly not holding it against me. It's all right. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. No need to feel embarrassed, man. I was mortified, but at least he wasn't treating it like the disaster I thought it was. Still, I spent the rest of the day feeling like I'd just gone through the most humiliating experience of my life. The kicker? Later that evening, Emily responded to the letter I did actually send to her, after double-checking the recipient this time. She was beyond thrilled. She told me it made her day and that she loved me more than words could express. So, while things are back on track with her, I will never live down the fact that my boss now knows way too much about my romantic life. TIFU by accidentally sending a text that was meant for my girlfriend to my mom. It all started when my girlfriend and I were texting each other about a rather intimate weekend getaway we had planned. I had been really looking forward to it, and as a result, I was sending some suggestive messages to her throughout the day. To be honest, I was feeling pretty bold with the texts, and I was enjoying our flirty back and forth. But the series of events that followed completely spiraled out of control. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was at work, having a pretty relaxed day. I was sitting at my desk, glancing at the clock, and daydreaming about the weekend ahead. I had just gotten a message from my girlfriend, and like any normal, loving couple, we were sending each other goofy, playful texts. One of those texts was a bit more suggestive than usual. I had been joking with her about some wild things I had planned for us, things that were definitely not suitable for public conversation, definitely not something I'd want my mom to read. So, I got the idea to send her a slightly cheeky text that was meant to make her laugh, but also add a little bit of spice to our weekend plans. It was a funny, flirty message that was definitely not for the faint of heart. You know the type, one of those texts that makes you blush but is also exciting to send. I was absolutely thrilled by the idea of her reaction. Now, here's where everything went wrong. My mom had sent me a text earlier in the day, asking about my plans for the weekend. She had texted me something simple like, "Hey, what are you up to this weekend?" which is something she does all the time, usually just checking in. I had been busy with work, so I hadn't replied yet, but now that I was sitting there with a bit of free time, I decided to respond to her message. As I opened my phone to check the conversation, I saw that the text from my girlfriend was still open. Without thinking, I swiped up to get to my mom's conversation and began typing my response. I was still thinking about the weekend with my girlfriend, so I wrote out my text, but the problem was that my brain was still focused on the spicy message I had just sent my girlfriend. So when I sent the message, I didn't notice that it was the wrong one. The message I sent to my mom read, "I can't wait for you to be on top of me this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. You're going to love it." My stomach dropped when I saw the notification that my mom had received my message. I immediately realized what had happened. The horror hit me like a wave as I glanced at the text on my screen and realized I had just sent something meant for my girlfriend to my mom. I stared at the screen, absolutely frozen. My mind was racing. Did I just send that? Did I really just send that to my mom? What do I do now? My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest, I was sure it would give me away to my coworkers. There I was, sitting at my desk, trying to process the fact that I had accidentally sent my mom a text that was, in no uncertain terms, very intimate and not at all suitable for her eyes. I panicked. My first instinct was to text my mom immediately and apologize for the confusion, but I realized that doing that would only make it worse. The more I thought about it, the more I was convinced there was no good way out of this. So I did the only thing I could think of. I called my mom. The phone rang twice, and by the third ring, I knew I had to face the music. She answered, and I could hear the calmness in her voice, as if she had no idea that her son had just sent her the most awkward and inappropriate text message of all time. "Hey, sweetie. How are you?" she said, sounding cheerful as usual. I took a deep breath and did my best to play it cool, but I couldn't help but stammer, "Hey, Mom. Everything's good here, yeah, just working away. How about you?" "Oh, just the usual. I was wondering if you wanted to grab dinner on Sunday," she replied. She didn't mention the text. I thought maybe she hadn't read it yet, but I didn't want to take the risk. I had to address it head on. "Mom," I said, trying to sound as casual as possible, I need to apologize. I think I might have, sent you the wrong message earlier. It wasn't meant for you." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, and my stomach dropped even lower. Then, her voice cracked through the silence, Oh no. What did you send me?" I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Well, it's kind of awkward. It was a text for someone else, and it was, not appropriate for you." She was quiet for a moment before she sighed. "I'm guessing this isn't the first time you've sent an inappropriate text, huh?" At that point, I realized that, somehow, despite the absurdity of the situation, my mom was being a lot more understanding than I had anticipated. Maybe it was because she had dealt with similar embarrassing moments when I was younger. Maybe it was because she knew I wasn't a total idiot, but she wasn't even laughing at my misfortune. "I'm really sorry," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. "I promise I wasn't thinking when I sent it. It was meant for someone else. But I can't even believe I did that." "Don't worry about it, honey," she said, her voice full of an oddly comforting calmness. "Just make sure you double-check next time. And, maybe keep those kinds of messages between you and your girlfriend." I was mortified. "I swear, I'll be more careful. I can't believe this happened." "Well, it's just another one of those things you'll laugh about when you're older," she said with a chuckle. "But if you need to explain it to your father at some point, good luck with that." I panicked again, imagining the fallout if my dad found out. "Oh God, I'm going to die." My mom laughed. "You'll survive, but maybe avoid sending those kinds of texts to anyone in this family." After a few more minutes of awkward, yet strangely reassuring, conversation, I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but at least my mom wasn't angry or upset. Still, I couldn't shake the cringeworthy thought of what had just happened. I knew I had just narrowly avoided a much worse situation, and yet, the embarrassment still lingered. So here I am, forever scarred by my own stupidity, hoping that my mom forgets about this in a few years. As for my girlfriend, I had to admit my mistake to her as well, and she found it absolutely hilarious. Thankfully, she didn't hold it against me. But I swear, I will never again send anything even remotely risky without triple-checking the recipient. If I've learned anything from this, it's that my phone should have a built-in safety net that prevents me from making such catastrophic mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, I'll double-check every text from now on. Lesson learned: never send anything steamy to the wrong person, especially not to your mom. TIFU by letting my curiosity get the best of me and accidentally becoming a part of an international smuggling ring. I should have known better. You know that feeling when you have something you absolutely should not do, but curiosity just takes over and you end up doing it anyway? That's what happened to me last month. And let me tell you, my life has been one big mess since then. It all started innocently enough. I'm a bit of an amateur treasure hunter, and no, I don't mean I'm out there digging up old pirate maps or anything. I just enjoy finding cool little antique shops and markets when I travel, looking for items that have stories to tell. It's a fun hobby, and over the years, I've developed a decent eye for hidden gems. So, I was on a business trip to a small European country, let's call it Country X. It's a beautiful place, a mix of cobblestone streets, medieval architecture, and plenty of history to go around. I had a few free hours after meetings, so I decided to explore the local flea market, hoping to find something unique. I was browsing the usual assortment of old furniture, trinkets, and knickknacks when something caught my eye. A small, intricately carved wooden box. It was pretty plain at first glance, but there was something about it that intrigued me. It was the sort of thing you'd find tucked away in the back of a dusty shop, but I could tell it had potential. The seller, an elderly man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, seemed eager to get rid of it. When I asked him about it, he smiled and told me it was a family heirloom that he was trying to sell because he didn't have any children to pass it down to. He also mentioned that it came from a small town in Country X that was famous for its woodwork and craftsmanship. Naturally, I was curious. I had no real plans to buy it, but I asked him how much he wanted for it. He seemed a little hesitant but then gave me a price that was far too good to pass up. I had a feeling it was worth more than he was letting on, but something about the whole situation felt a bit off. Maybe it was the way he handed the box over, like he was almost relieved to be rid of it. Or maybe it was just that I'd never seen anything quite like it before. At the time, I figured I could sell it later or give it to someone as a gift. It didn't matter much. The price was cheap, and I felt like I could take a little gamble on it. Big mistake. After buying the box, I stashed it in my luggage and went about the rest of my trip. I didn't think much of it, aside from the occasional thought about how nice it would look on a shelf at home. I even forgot about it for a few days, until I got back to my apartment. That's when things took a turn for the worse. A few days after returning home, I was in the middle of unpacking my suitcase when I decided to open the box for the first time. It was locked, but the seller had given me a small, rusted key that fit. I turned the key and opened it, and that's when I made my second mistake. Inside the box was a piece of paper, neatly folded. There was no writing on it, but it was clear this was the real treasure. As soon as I touched the paper, I felt a slight jolt, like an electrical shock, but it wasn't enough to make me drop it. I opened the paper carefully, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't a letter or map, like I expected. It was a list of names, addresses, and photos, dozens of them. And they weren't random people. These were individuals from various countries, mostly Europe and the Middle East. I didn't know them, but they looked serious. Some were smiling in their photos, but others had blank expressions. The addresses attached to each name seemed to correspond to locations I didn't recognize. I had no idea what I was holding, but something told me I should not have touched it. This felt like something bigger than I was prepared for, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. After a few moments of hesitation, I shoved the paper back in the box, locked it up again, and stuffed it into the back of my closet. I thought about calling the authorities, but I didn't even know how to begin explaining it. Plus, I didn't want to sound like a paranoid fool. For a few days, I lived in a state of nervous anxiety, wondering if I was in over my head. But then, the strange things started happening. I started getting phone calls from unknown numbers. At first, I ignored them, but they kept coming, sometimes multiple times a day. I had a couple of voicemails, all in languages I didn't understand. I didn't bother trying to translate them. They just felt wrong. I assumed it was just some kind of mistake, maybe a wrong number. But when I found a note slipped under my door one evening, I knew something was going on. The note was written in a language I couldn't identify, but it wasn't hard to make out the words, "Return what you took." I thought it was a prank, but I didn't take any chances. I locked the box in my closet and started researching the names on the list. That's when I found it. The name of one person on the list matched a headline I saw years ago about an international smuggling ring busted in several countries across Europe and the Middle East. The article mentioned how they were known for trafficking rare artifacts, historical objects, and, wait for it, rarely, but occasionally, human cargo. I froze when I read that. I went into full panic mode. This wasn't just some antique or collectible. The box was tied to something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't just return it to the flea market, and I couldn't go to the police because I had no idea what I was dealing with. If the people behind this were dangerous enough to use something like that as a smuggling operation, there was no telling what they'd do to someone who had stumbled into their business. The calls kept coming, and the feeling of being watched grew. I started noticing cars that seemed to be parked outside my apartment building, always at odd hours. Every time I'd go out, they'd drive off when they saw me. I didn't know who these people were, but I was terrified they were going to find me. I started taking extreme measures. I moved to a different place, changed my phone number, and even filed a report with the local police. They didn't take it seriously at first, until they found out that the list contained the names of some prominent people tied to illicit activities. They started to investigate, but by then, I'd already taken the box to a secure location, hoping to get rid of it once and for all. So now, I'm in hiding. I don't know if I'm just being paranoid, but I don't think I'll ever feel safe again. I've told my closest friends and family, but none of them understand why I'm so terrified. I learned the hard way that curiosity doesn't just kill cats, it can land you in the middle of something you'll never be able to outrun. All because I picked up a stupid little wooden box at a flea market. Now, I have to live with the consequences. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with my cooking skills and accidentally setting my kitchen on fire. I've always been the type to want to impress people, especially when it comes to romantic interests. So, when I started talking to Sarah, the girl who sat next to me in my biology class, I figured I'd do something bold and show her that I wasn't just some average guy. I'm not exactly a chef, but I figured a homemade dinner would be a good way to stand out. Plus, I heard she was into cooking, so I thought I could kill two birds with one stone, show her that I could cook and maybe win a little favor in the process. Spoiler alert, I killed 3 birds with one stone, and none of them were cooked. It all started when I invited Sarah over to my place for dinner. I didn't give her too much detail because I didn't want to make it sound like I was trying too hard, but I did drop a few hints about what I had planned. She seemed interested, and we agreed on a date. I felt good about myself. I was ready to put on my metaphorical apron and dazzle her with my culinary prowess. In my mind, I was already Gordon Ramsay, minus the swearing. What I didn't know was that I was about to experience a kitchen disaster of biblical proportions. I spent the whole day before her visit scouring the internet for recipes. I didn't want to overdo it, but I wanted to do something impressive enough to show off. I landed on the idea of making a homemade risotto with a side of roasted vegetables and, for dessert, a fancy lemon tart. It sounded like a solid plan, right? Simple, elegant, and impressive. My confidence was through the roof. The day arrived, and I spent the afternoon prepping. I meticulously chopped the vegetables, measured out the ingredients for the risotto, and made sure the tart crust was just right. I even set the table with candles and tried to make everything look a little fancier than it actually was. I had the whole romantic dinner at home vibe going. If things went well, I was sure it would be the beginning of something great. As Sarah arrived, I greeted her at the door with a big smile and a little too much enthusiasm. She smiled back, and we exchanged pleasantries. I led her to the dining room, where I had everything set up. I tried to act casual, but my nerves were running wild. I could feel my heart racing. I told her to take a seat and that dinner would be ready in a few minutes. That's when I realized I'd made a critical mistake. I'd planned everything so meticulously, but I hadn't actually thought about the timing. I started the risotto first. I had watched a video online that made it look easy, so I was feeling pretty confident. I heated the broth, sautéed the onions, and started adding the rice. But here's the thing about risotto, it requires constant stirring. I thought I'd be able to multitask, but I quickly realized that this wasn't the type of dish you could leave unattended. I turned to the oven to check on the roasted vegetables, and when I came back, the risotto had already started to stick to the bottom of the pot. Panic mode set in. I grabbed a spatula and tried to salvage the mess, but the rice was sticking, burning slightly, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. Sarah was chatting away at the table, oblivious to my mounting stress. I tried to laugh it off, telling her it was just a little bit of flavor, but inside, I was spiraling. I managed to salvage the risotto somewhat by adding more broth and stirring like a madman, but it still wasn't looking quite right. At that moment, the oven beeped, signaling that the vegetables were done. I opened the oven door, and that's when things went from bad to worse. I had set the oven to a high temperature to get a good char on the vegetables, and the moment I opened the door, a cloud of smoke billowed out. The vegetables had started to burn, and some of the oil had splattered, catching fire. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. My first instinct was to panic, and that's exactly what I did. I slammed the oven door shut, but the fire didn't go away. It was still there, smoldering behind the door. Sarah, I started, trying to keep my cool. I think we have a little issue in the kitchen. She looked up, confused. What's wrong? I opened the oven door again to check on the fire, and that's when the real chaos began. The fire, which had been small and contained behind the oven door, suddenly erupted when the oxygen rushed in. Flames shot up, and I could feel the heat radiating toward my face. I immediately closed the door again, but now I was in full panic mode. The fire was bigger, and I had no idea what to do. My mind raced. Should I grab the fire extinguisher? Call 911? Panic? I was frozen. Sarah, seeing that I was clearly losing my composure, got up from the table and rushed to the kitchen. I managed to stammer, I think the vegetables caught fire, and she took charge. I didn't even know she knew what to do, but apparently, she did. She grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink and aimed it at the oven. The kitchen was immediately filled with a cloud of white powder, and we both started coughing. The fire was gone, but now the kitchen looked like a war zone. The vegetables were charred beyond recognition, and the risotto was stuck to the pot in the most unappetizing way. I had ruined the dinner, and I was left standing there, covered in flour-like powder, feeling like an idiot. Sarah, ever the good sport, tried to salvage the situation. "Hey, at least we didn't burn the whole place down," she said, her voice surprisingly upbeat despite the chaos. I half laughed, half cried at the absurdity of it all. The romantic dinner I had imagined turned into a disaster so monumental that I wasn't sure if we would ever be able to look back on it without laughing. In the end, we decided to order takeout. I called in an emergency pizza, and we sat at the table, eating our meal and laughing about the whole ordeal. Sarah said she appreciated the effort, but it was clear that my cooking skills needed some work. We spent the rest of the evening talking about everything from our childhoods to the best food fails we'd ever had. It wasn't exactly the fancy dinner I'd imagined, but it was still one of the best nights I'd had in a long time. Looking back, I'm grateful that Sarah wasn't a food snob and that she had a sense of humor. I definitely learned my lesson. Trying to impress someone with cooking is risky business, and sometimes, it's better to just keep it simple. But hey, I got a funny story out of it, and Sarah and I are still friends. I can't say we've ever tried cooking together again, though. Now, whenever I see Sarah in class, we share a knowing look, and she'll occasionally say, "So, have you burned anything down lately?" And we both burst out laughing. At least I know my mistakes haven't completely ruined my chances of friendship, but I don't think I'll ever try to impress anyone with risotto again. So this happened a few months ago, but the shame lingers like the incense I still smell in my dreams. I had just moved to San Francisco for a new job. I was hyped, broke, and very much a tech bro with delusions of grandeur. I was crashing in a shared house with 6 other over-caffeinated individuals who also thought they were one pivot away from changing the world. One Friday, after spending the whole day doom-scrolling through Hacker News and tweaking the same 3 lines of Python, I decided I needed to get out and do something productive. That's when I saw an Instagram story from a guy I had met at a product meetup. It was a flyer with a sleek black background, white minimalist font, and a mysterious message, "Awaken the future. Disrupt the self. Join us Friday night at the Arkansas 8 p.m. This screamed stealth mode startup pitch. The Ark sounded like the kind of obnoxious co-working space where people wear all birds and talk about eliminating friction. Plus, awaken the future? If that's not some cringe VC bait, I don't know what is. So I go. I put on my best quarter zip and my most neutral facial expression. The Ark turns out to be a big brutalist-looking building in the Mission District. The door is heavy and unmarked, but there's a guy at the entrance wearing a flowing gray tunic and a Bluetooth headset. He scans me up and down, nods once, and says, "Ah. Welcome, initiate." I assumed this was some dumb immersive theater startup thing. I'd seen weirder. I went in. The lobby was dimly lit with flickering candles and somehow already smelled like old paper and clove cigarettes. A tall woman with a shaved head handed me a small wooden coin and said, "This is your sigil. Do not lose it." She spoke in that weirdly calm voice that makes you question your own tone. I still thought I was crushing it. I thought this was branding. I thought this was cool. We were led into a circular room, all stone and dark wood, with maybe 40 other people, all standing in a rough spiral. The room was dead quiet except for some ambient music that sounded like someone humming underwater. A guy in the center, wearing what I can only describe as a futuristic wizard robe, stood up and raised his arms. He said, let us begin the unveiling. I swear to you, I still thought this was a startup thing. I figured this was just an overproduced TED Talk and someone was going to show me a slide deck about a new AI that reads your dreams or something. Instead, the guy starts chanting. The rest of the room joins in. They weren't speaking English. It sounded like a cross between Icelandic and old modem noises. At this point, I start to realize I might be out of my depth. But I can't just leave. They collected our phones at the door, to eliminate external noise, and locked them in little cubbies. I didn't want to look like a narc or, worse, someone who doesn't respect the grind. So I stayed. I told myself, just ride this out, network after. The chanting ends. A door opens behind the main speaker, and we're led down a hallway lit with soft blue LEDs. Each wall has weird geometrical carvings. We're told we'll be sorted by our internal coordinates. We enter individual chambers, basically small meditation rooms, where a person in a dark robe interviews you. Mine asked questions like, have you ever dreamed of being a different animal, and what part of your soul do you believe is missing? I thought it was an elaborate personality test. I answered with full sincerity. I even gave some answers I thought were unique and disruptive. I think I'm missing the part of my soul that understands rest, I said. The guy nodded and whispered, an echo seeker. Cool, I thought. That sounds like someone who beta tests metaphysical software. I'm escorted to a new chamber with 5 other people. We're handed translucent cubes filled with some kind of gelatin. We're told to eat them to begin the inner alignment. Here's where I really ed up. I ate it. It tasted like lavender and battery acid. My mouth went numb almost immediately. I thought, okay. Probably just CBD and monk fruit. It's California. About 10 minutes later, I realize this is not CBD. I start seeing trails, the lights pulse in sync with my heartbeat, and the walls look like they're breathing. A robed figure with a VR headset walks into the room and sits in the center. Welcome, Echo Seekers, he says. You have now entered level 1 of the frame. At this point, I knew, this was not a pitch event. But I couldn't move. I was tripping balls, and everyone around me looked serene and annoyingly well practiced in whatever they were doing. They began a guided group meditation where we had to chant our core names. I panicked and said Jason. The guide gave me a deeply disappointed look and said, your real name. I blurted out Tesla. I don't know why. I panicked. It sounded futuristic. The guide nodded and said, Tesla. Bearer of innovation. That name is old. After what felt like 4 years and a half-life of shame, I somehow stumbled my way out of the chamber, made it back to the lobby, begged for my phone, and left. I don't remember the Uber ride home. I woke up the next morning on my bathroom floor with a sticky note on my chest that said, the frame awaits you. I spent the next 2 days Googling everything I could. Turns out the Ark is an actual cult. Like a real one. With chapters. They believe we're all trapped in a simulation, but only by syncing our inner frequencies through rituals, mushrooms, and currency sacrifice. Yep, they mean money. Can we reach the true self? I didn't tell anyone at work, but 2 weeks later, one of my coworkers saw the wooden coin on my desk. He went dead silent and said, oh no. You've been framed. So now I live with that. I once voluntarily joined a pseudo-religious tech cult because I thought I was about to pitch my meditation calendar app. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult during my vacation to relax after a burnout. So I have 31M, work in the tech industry, which should already tell you I spend too much time on Zoom, drink way too much cold brew, and don't see sunlight unless it's bouncing off my monitor. I'd been riding a burnout wave for about 6 months straight. I'm talking waking up with Slack notifications already stressing me out, falling asleep with Jira boards in my dreams, and completely forgetting what weekends are. When I started crying during a stand-up meeting for no reason, my manager forced me to take time off. No debate. Just go. Touch grass. Disconnect. I didn't argue. Instead, I Googled quiet retreats to reset your mind and found a rustic retreat in the woods of Oregon. Minimal internet. No phones. Guided meditation, healthy food, lots of yoga, journaling. It was marketed as a spiritual detox. Sounded perfect. I booked a 2-week stay and flew out with just a backpack, a few clothes, and zero expectations. The retreat, which I'll call the Grove, was hidden deep in the forest. The drive from the airport took over 3 hours, and the last 30 minutes were on a dirt road full of potholes. When we arrived, a barefoot guy in a linen tunic greeted me like I was a long-lost cousin. Everyone wore similar tunics in soft colors, and they all smiled like they were perpetually high on something wholesome. Day 1 was chill. We did breathwork, walked barefoot on moss, and ate lentils and wild greens. People hugged me randomly. There was a woman named Sparrow who cried when I said I worked in software, and told me she used to be addicted to Google Calendar. I laughed. She didn't. Still, it felt peaceful. I figured these people were just on their own path to wellness. I kept an open mind. By day 3, I was sleeping better, waking up earlier, and even journaling my dreams. They had a schedule written in beautiful calligraphy on parchment paper that included things like sun gratitude, rebirthing breath ceremony, and silent forest bathing. Okay. Weird, but harmless. But on day 5, things started to get strange. I was invited to something called the Inner Route. I thought it was a meditation circle. Instead, it was a candlelit gathering in a hollowed-out tree dome with everyone wearing white robes, not tunics, actual robes, chanting in a language I'd never heard. I sat down, kind of amused, until someone gave me a cup of a thick, earthy drink and called it the gift of the Seed Mother. I asked what was in it. They said it would open my channels. I didn't drink it. That night, my bunkmate Whisper, told me that once I drank the Seed Mother's gift, I would understand the truth of the weave. I asked him what the weave was. He just stared at me, eyes wide, and whispered everything. At this point, I started to suspect I might have accidentally joined a cult. But here's the thing, I still didn't want to be rude. These people were weird, but they were also incredibly kind. And for the first time in months, I wasn't anxious. I figured I'd ride it out a few more days and leave early if it got too weird. Huge mistake. On day 7, we had a ceremony at dusk. They called it the shedding. I thought it was just another weird forest ritual, but when I showed up, everyone had shaved their heads. Sparrow handed me a knife made of obsidian and said, "It's time to free the old you." I laughed nervously and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna keep the old me for now." Nobody laughed. Then 2 guys named River and Echo grabbed my shoulders, gently but firmly, and tried to guide me to the middle of the circle. I yanked away and said I wasn't comfortable. Echo looked hurt. River looked like he was about to cry. Sparrow said, "Your ego is resisting. That's okay. The weave is patient." I went back to my cabin to pack my stuff. But my backpack was gone. So were my shoes. Whisper appeared in the doorway and said softly, "You don't need to run. You're safe. We've all tried to run. The weave will hold you." I locked myself in the bathroom overnight and decided that no peaceful forest retreat was worth this level of live-action horror movie. I was done. At first light, I took off. Barefoot. Wearing a freaking linen tunic. I had no phone, no map, and no idea how to get back to the main road, but I figured if I kept walking downhill, I'd hit something eventually. After maybe 2 hours of dodging tree branches and slipping on moss, I stumbled onto a service road and flagged down a stunned forest ranger who thought I was either high or having a mental breakdown. When I explained where I came from, he nodded slowly and said, "Yeah, we've had a few people come out of there." He gave me his phone, and I called a friend to Venmo me money for a bus back to Portland. I spent the next 2 nights in a cheap motel, showering 5 times a day and binge-watching sitcoms just to feel normal again. When I finally logged into my email, I had 64 unread messages and a weird sense of gratitude for corporate monotony. I eventually did some research and found out that the Grove had been investigated a few years back for coercive group practices and illegal hallucinogenic ceremonies. Apparently, they'd rebranded under a new name every few years to avoid scrutiny. They weren't officially classified as a cult, but let's just say they weren't not a cult either. Anyway, now I tell people I went off-grid for a spiritual reset and leave out the part where I almost became Brother Codeleaf, prophet of the weave. TIFU by pretending to know how to sail because I wanted to impress my girlfriend's dad, who is a semi-retired Navy officer, and now the Coast Guard thinks I'm either the dumbest pirate ever or a threat to national security. This happened last weekend. I've been dating my girlfriend Erin for about a year now, and her dad, a stoic, ex-Navy hard-ass named Richard, has always been the final boss I needed to impress. The guy doesn't smile. He inspects people. If you say you work in IT, he wants to know what languages you code in and how you'd handle a packet sniffing attack. I work in marketing. The most technical thing I do is fight with fonts. Anyway, Erin mentioned that her dad owns a 34-foot Catalina sailboat that he keeps at the marina about an hour out of town. It's his pride and joy, she said, he's always out on the water. That gave me an idea. I decided I'd tell him I knew how to sail too. Why? Because apparently my brain short-circuited and I thought this would make him like me. So when he asked me last Thursday if I've ever sailed before, I gave the most confident "oh yeah, a bunch of times" you've ever heard. The man raised one eyebrow, like something out of a military drama, and said, "Good. We'll head out Saturday. Weather should be solid. We'll see if you remember your knots." Knots? Oh hell. I spent the next 36 hours binging sailing tutorials on YouTube, downloading diagrams of sailboat anatomy, and even bought a piece of rope from Home Depot so I could practice tying a bowline in my kitchen. My cat now hates me. I memorized terms like halyard, jib, tack, and tried to work them casually into conversations with myself in the mirror like some demented method actor. Saturday comes. We get to the marina and there she is, the Valhalla, looking pristine, menacing, and like it's about to expose every lie I've ever told. Erin's dad is wearing a faded Naval Academy cap, boat shoes, and an expression that screams, "Sink and I'll let you." He tosses me a coiled rope and says, "Secure the bowline to the cleat." I panic. I do some combination of a square knot, a loop, and what I think was a double helix. He stares at it. Says nothing. Walks away. We push off. Things were okay for the first 15 minutes. I adjusted the sails like I thought you were supposed to. We got a decent wind and started cruising. I even cracked a joke about the telltales, which I thought showed I knew my stuff. Richard nodded once. I thought I was in. Then he goes below deck to check the radio and says, "Keep her steady." That's when things began to fall apart. I must have turned the tiller the wrong way because suddenly the boat is lurching off course. I try to correct it, but now the wind is hitting the sail sideways, and everything starts flapping like a dying bird. I grab a rope, wrong one. I loosen it, big mistake, the boom swings violently to the side and nearly knocks me into the water. I duck. I panic. I pull another rope. Something snaps. Richard comes flying up from below deck like Poseidon with a vengeance. "What the hell are you doing?" he yells over the wind. I try to explain, but at that moment, the sail catches a rogue gust and we jibe hard, like full 180 degrees, and now we're headed directly toward a no-wake zone near the edge of the marina, full of expensive boats and very upset retirees sipping wine. I try to steer us away, but I have no idea what I'm doing. We skim past a pontoon with about 6 very tan, very angry people who start shouting. Richard grabs the tiller, but by now we're sideways in the narrow channel and blocking it entirely like a sailboat Suez Canal. Boats are honking. One guy throws a beer can at us. Erin is on the dock with her hands over her mouth. Richard somehow manages to get us unstuck and guides us into open water, where he just stops the boat and looks at me. I try to say something, anything, but my mouth is dry and the sun feels like it's judging me. He goes, "You lied." I nod. He says, "You could have gotten someone killed." I nod again. Then he sighs and says, "Well, if you're going to make a mess of things, you better clean it up. Take us back. Properly." So now, the real test. Except I still don't know what I'm doing. I make it about 20 minutes before I accidentally cross into a restricted military testing zone. Apparently, those red markers mean something. A very large, very fast boat with sirens comes toward us. It's the Coast Guard. They start hailing us on the radio. I pretend not to hear. Richard answers them and calmly says, "No, sir, we're not armed. No, just lost. No, we're turning around now." They escort us back to the regular boating lanes like we're a lost duckling. One of them actually yells, "Read a chart next time, genius," and laughs. I want to jump into the ocean and let the embarrassment consume me. We dock in silence. Later that evening, Erin tells me Richard hasn't laughed like that in years. Apparently, while I was downstairs changing out of my soaked pants, I sat on a wet bench and it looked like I'd peed myself. Richard told her, "He's a dumbass. But he's got guts. I'll take guts." So I guess I passed. Barely. But the next time he asks if I know how to do something, I'll tell the truth. Except maybe about golf. I think I can fake golf. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.